This is a carnewscafe.com podcast quick sip.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Aaron Turpin at carnewscafe.com. Today I want to talk about a beautiful classic that is going to auction on June 1st. This will be at the Historics at Brooklands in Surrey, England. This car is actually an American-made car. It is a 1918 LaFrance Open Speedster. Now, if you don't know what this is, and you probably don't, this is a car that was made by a fire truck maker. American LaFrance actually makes fire trucks. They still do to this day. They opened their doors in 1830, and around the turn of the century, a couple of decades after that, the thing that most car makers did, whether they made big cars, little cars, or anything automotive, was they made some sort of race car every so often in order to compete and kind of make a name for themselves. This is one of those. This is something that LaFrance made in order to showcase how great they could be. What they did was they took a fire truck chassis and they made a race car out of it. For the time period, this is a speed demon. It sports 14.5 liters of displacement, and it's about as eco-unconscious as you can get, but it is one of the most awesome vehicles ever made. The whole front end of the car, the first half of the car, is just one giant stainless engine housing. It's a huge coffin-shaped engine holder with a bunch of slits down the sides for air. And on the front is this huge, ostentatious hood ornament that today we would see as nothing short of a people skewer. The wheels on this car are actually taken directly from artillery. Field artillery of the time used these massive wooden wheels, which is what this car uses, and those wheels are capped by thick, heavy rubber. Obviously, the rubber that's on the car that's going to be auctioned is not original, but originally this would have had a very heavy, solid rubber wheel, not an air-inflated wheel. And for all of that, this car with that huge engine and all that displacement was capable of a lot of speed. Let me go over the car a little bit and talk to you about what this is. The chassis number is SV5636, which was built in New York and shipped to the United Kingdom for some lucky buyer. It became a touring vehicle after a short racing stint and attended some rallies and then received a full historical overhaul a few years ago. This was an extremely impressive machine in 1918, and now 95 years later that hasn't changed at all. It sports a blue leather bench that sits high so that you're kind of given a commanding view of the countryside, but you better wear goggles because there's no windscreen on this car. The vehicle has this 14.5 liter displacement. That's 2.4 liters per cylinder under this thing's hood. The 3.5 ton machine can go up to 93 miles an hour. Now, in 1918, 93 miles an hour was horaciously fast. Aircraft barely made that kind of speed. And it does it while on those huge wooden wagon wheels. It is amazing. And even more amazing than that is when you look at the back of the car, it does not have a drive shaft. It's chain driven. If you can imagine that huge engine coupled to a 3-speed transmission that today would be seen as one of the biggest boat anchors ever made because it's just gigantic. That 3-speed transmission turns a shaft that spins a chain to move the rear wheels. That is hard to imagine anybody going over 90 miles an hour on something like this. But it is a beautiful car. It is mammoth in proportions and has a very powerful output. Remember, this is a car that was based on a fire truck. The engine, drivetrain, and everything and the chassis are made to carry a huge amount of weight, but it doesn't have that because it's an open roadster car. It is a beautiful example of what crazy things were happening in those days. One of these cars has appeared in a lot of races over time. It is a very popular vehicle in the Peking to Paris rally. In fact, one has appeared in that every year except for one. And in the West to East Road Race here in the U.S., one of these is in it every single year, at least one. There are actually several a lot of times. Now, this is going to auction on June 1st in Surrey, England, and It's expected to bring somewhere between 42,000 and 48,000 British pounds. That's about 63 to 72,000 US dollars. It sounds like a lot of money, but think about what this is. It's a 1918 LaFrance Open Speedster, and it is an awesome example of what was going on in those days. I hope the photos that go along with this do it justice, because this is probably one of the coolest American-made cars of the period. If you can beg, borrow, or steal that kind of jang, you should definitely put your name in the hat to try to win this car. It's beautiful. That's it for this podcast quick sip. This is Aaron Turpin from carnewscafe.com. See you soon.